Welcome to Let's Talk Possibilities, episode 86, 1st of July, 2013. We're talking about BEE. The amendment bill was passed today. We're going to talk about these issues and we're going to talk about the consequences of these changes. Thanks for listening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Possibilities, where we explore ideas, challenge thinking, and inspire action. Tonight, well, my name is Chris Dykes, and tonight we're talking to Keith, who's the CEO of BBBEE, a specialist BEE consulting company. He has many years of business experience working with and advising companies in BEE strategy. We also have Andile with us. Andile is the founder of Infocom, a BEE verification agency, and BEE and yourbusiness.com, a service where companies can apply for BEE certificates online. He is also a member of the BEE Presidential Advisory Council Subcommittee on instruments to promote BEE charters and verification. So in October in 2012, we hosted a show with Andile and Keith about the revised codes and fronting. And so tonight, we're going to try and focus on the recent changes associated with the amendment bill and the revised codes, and then some thoughts for the future. So in an article published on the 20th of June by Fin24 entitled "Low BEE Levels Necessitate New Laws," Rob Davies was quoted as saying, "In fact, in the private and the public sector together came in at a level 8, which means basically not really making a significant contribution to BEE at all. A level 1 BEE rating companies were 100% black-owned, while a level 8 rating meant that there was no or very little empowerment." Rob Davies also was quoted by saying that by and large we haven't got very much of the empowerment of suppliers of bigger business. We also found there were significant challenges of fronting in the economy. Keith, in an article that you wrote today, you commented that confusion reigns at the moment. Can we start off by clarifying what the difference is between the amendment bill and the revised codes? And can you briefly explain why there is an amendment bill?
Good evening.
Good evening.
The amendment bill is going to replace the BEE Act of 2003. It was the act that set up broad-based black economic empowerment. It described how BEE should be implemented, and it also created the concept of BEE codes of good practice. So it's a short act, it's about 5 pages long, and it's been, as I say, 10 years in the making. So it needed to be changed. There were some problems with the act itself, things like fronting, as you've mentioned, and also interpretations to the BEE codes. Many acts tend to be updated a lot more often than the BEE Act, which is now 10 years old. So the BEE Amendment Bill is intended to update that and make it better, and we'll discuss it later, various improvements. At the same time, as I said, the BEE Act mandates the Minister to issue BEE codes of good practice, which is that good old-fashioned BEE scorecard. And that is the codes or the revised codes that we spoke about last time. So there are two different concepts. One is the Act, and the other one are the BEE codes. So the two of them are obviously linked, but they're also mutually exclusive in that the Minister can update the codes as and when he wishes, go through a process of discussion before the codes are issued. The BEE Act itself has to go through Parliament, etc., which it is now being done.
Okay, great. And in your article, you mentioned that the codes have been passed by Parliament as of today, but it still needs to go through the Council of Provinces and then get signed into law by the President.
Yeah, that's right. The process is the Act itself came out about 2 years ago, went through Parliament, parliamentary discussions, etc. Now we've got to go to the National Council of Provinces. That will probably approve it without too much difficulty because most of the political parties agreed with the Act in the first place.
Yeah.
And then the President's got to get round to signing it. I suspect it's going to take another 6 weeks to 2 months, just through the admin process before the President signs it into power.
Okay. And so, Andile, from your perspective, what do you think some of the consequences are for business that are going to result as an outcome of these changes?
The Act or the revised code? Because
at this point, the Act.
The Act.
Yeah.
Look, I think what the Act is doing now is basically empowering the minister to effect concrete changes in the code with a yardstick and close some of the loopholes, as Keith has indicated. I think the real impact is on the codes. And I think what people must understand is that in a normal legislative framework, if the BBBEE was implemented by government would pass a bill which will be an act, and any changes thereof in terms of the implementation will be effected through regulations. And in the finance industry or PFMA, the people used to call those treasury regulations. So codes are more a way of government to effect implementation of a particular act in the private sector. So the meat of this whole implementation will be on the codes. And I mean, I'll give you an example. This morning I was doing a calculation on the impact of the increase on skills development, for example, from 3% to 6% of leviable amount. And I just took one SETA, for example, like an MICT SETA, that collects about 470 million. And I just multiplied all those compliance levels. So there's basically about 11.3% multiplier, which means the impact of the codes when they're being effected means that companies, in this particular case, the ICT, will have to spend about 1.5 billion on skills development. So that's the real impact that you're going to see. Now, the question is, what is that going to do to the economy? And is there opportunity out of that and the implications thereof?
Okay. And in terms of individual companies,
yes,
what does this mean for let's say the man on the street, the average director of a company who is now wanting to implement BEE and play their role in transformation?
I think it depends on the level where you are as a business. I think for small business, if you are black owned, of course, there's a concession there that now you got an automatic in the code.
If I may, just to stop you there, just to clarify, I think what you're talking about with the exemption is with regard to the revised codes, right?
Yes, the revised.
Okay, but in terms of if we just go back to the amendment bill for the moment,
yes,
and just to talk about the consequence of the amendment bill for the average man on the street.
Yes, I think the average man on the street, and in BEE terms, my view is that there's no average man, because you can take a guy from a taxi rank as average and make him a CEO of a listed company as an example. Now what it means is that now with a commissioner, he or she is going to intervene in terms of the transactions that people are going to be conducting in terms of BEE, because in the past some people were crying foul in terms of how they structure those transactions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is now listed companies will be obligated to report on BEE. The good thing is that public companies, departments will also have to comply with BEE. And for that to happen, government had to put an act for every department to comply with BEE.
Okay, great. Keith, from your perspective, what do you see as the consequence of the amendment bill for companies?
Well, I love it because, as Andile said, the BEE Commissioner is going to be established.
Yes.
And one of the little problems that we tend to have is of interpretation. Yes. So we do our best to interpret what the codes are saying, and as in all acts and regulation, it's not always clear. Now we've got somebody, or we will have somebody, I don't know how soon it will happen, that we're able to go along and ask for an interpretation, so we're going to be, number one, consistent.
And that is... if I can just play devil's advocate here, the DTI in the past was supposedly playing that role, and there's been years and years and years of interpretation issues that are still outstanding. So is this actually going to happen or not?
Well, the Act now mandates it to happen.
Okay.
The DTI are an administrative department. So while we, in a way, pushed them into trying to give us an answer, and they always rejected trying to get that answer. And
there was lots of ducking and diving. In fact, if we went to the Olympics on ducking and diving, we could have done pretty good.
And if rugby was an Olympic sport, passing the buck would have been pretty good as well. But in general, because it is now mandated,
yes.
We can at least go along and ask the question.
Okay.
And from the so-called average company.
Yes.
Little things like the interpretations around small aspects and not the big deals, which of course are where maybe fronting takes place, but the little things that cause a two-level differential between two different agencies. Also, the methodology that agencies are forced to use is also going to change. So it's going to make our life easier. We'll be able to, as a consultant, we'll be able to give a more definitive answer. From a dealer's viewpoint, he'll be able to give a far more a definite answer to his clients as well. And of course, that does relate through to the fronting, where if you are found guilty of fronting, you can stand up to 10 years in jail or 10% of your annual turnover. And it goes as far as saying that even consultants or professionals, verification analysts, etc., who are involved in this can also stand to sit in jail for a while. So I'm not prepared to go to jail for my client, and neither is anybody. The fronting regulations even say that if you're the CEO of a company, you either should know or you ought to have known what you're doing. So you can't say, well, I didn't really know about this. I left it in the hands of my PA and she did it wrong.
Okay, good. So, just to what we were saying about getting too much into the detail of fronting, just to go back to what we were saying and the question we're having with Andile about what this means for companies. If a company is operating ethically with integrity, then fronting shouldn't be an issue, and therefore what consequence would there be as a result of this new bill?
He'll have absolutely no consequence. In fact, the consequence is he'll feel a lot happier knowing that his opposition is maybe getting caught out. So he'll feel happy. Everyone will feel a lot happier. Also, it's going to probably incur or ensure that there's going to be a lot more transformation and compliance. Because nobody's going to want to get away with it. Some people spend more time trying to get away with it than actually doing the job properly in the first place. So it's going to help everybody, I think.
I think from an economic terms, the impact on business, I think the reality of the issue here is that transformation is actually an investment in something. So someone out there as a company invests resources to do things right. So there's a cost associated or capital associated with that. And what the bill seeks to achieve is, in my view, protect the investment of people that are doing BEE the correct way. But we are shying away from basically having a text that says we are actually talking about capital. At the end of the day, company A is going to spend 15 million rands on transformation. Company B is going to spend nothing. And they can go and manipulate the system and misstate their BEE credentials to the level that on face value you can think both companies are the same. So for me, it's really about that. And I see it in a positive way, because if you want to do it correctly, follow the rules, you are protected. So for me, the act will protect the investment in BEE at any level.
Good. But now, it's once again just to sort of question the unintended consequences of a change like this. If a person, a director, is nervous of these consequences because of this thing of you should know, you ought to have known, etc., surely they're likely to be more conservative in how they implement their strategies. And could this not have some kind of an impact on what the objective of transformation is about? And so we end up starting to tick boxes as opposed to really achieving transformation results.
From my viewpoint, as you know, I don't like the phrase of B is a box ticking exercise.
Yes,
you've got to actually do the work to tick the box.
Isn't that a risk that it could become more of a box ticking exercise?
I really don't think so. I think one of the biggest reasons for non-compliance is people don't understand. They maybe deliberately don't want to understand, or they genuinely don't understand. Now they're going to have to go along and look at it and say, what is it that I need to do? And I really do believe by looking at it and seeing what those codes say, they're going to say, you know what, this isn't nearly as daunting, as difficult as I thought it was. So I am going to get involved. I'm hoping that it's going to make people a lot more positive towards a process which we know that they aren't. And you said earlier on that the minister said that the average level of compliance is a level 8. My estimate is that only 15% of all the companies out there have actually got round to even producing a certificate.
Yes.
Never mind. While some companies have got it, most have still not got round to doing it. Yeah, the good big ones have done so. The small, medium ones, maybe the people watching and listening, haven't taken the leap of faith to do it. So we've got a long way to go. We need to encourage these guys.
So do you think then that these changes are going to be more encouraging, because they're sounding from my perspective like it's more punitive? I think is the word we're saying. It's like if you don't do it, you should go and spend 10 years in jail. And if you do it incorrectly or the quick way around...
I think the incentive is there already. And if you look at the way this whole level of status links to how government does procurement from the treasury point of view, there's already an incentive for every company to comply. Because if you, for example, level 1 in your competitor is level 8, which is 0 in this case as an example, and if your tender is above $1 million, basically it means you are 10% cheaper than them. Two things you could do. You could actually mark up your price by 9%. You'll still win the deal. And that could be an equivalent of what you've spent on BE.
So it does give you a competitive advantage to be compliant.
Of course.
But are they, so we're trying to find out what the consequences are. So one of the consequences you said was in that IT sector was a huge figure around training.
Yeah, this was
where does it, surely that is going to affect someone's bottom line. Someone has to pay to train those people. I'm just wondering,
Sure.
if that's not some of the man on the street kind of thing. Is like, it's going to cost me more money to implement some of this stuff than it does to just, I'm not even getting
returns on it. You see, that's exactly the debate we're not there yet. To say, by the way, we're talking about all these companies, including myself, for example. As a company, I have the similar situation where I have to invest in making sure that I comply. And the question we're not there yet is to look and say, is it worth the investment? And I think the Act protects me, because the minute I lose a deal from a company that is fronting, I'll be the first one to go and sue that service provider. And they will then make sure that whoever who won a deal on the basis that their BE credentials were misstated, then the provisions of the Act will kick in terms of the penalties, in terms of the commissioner cancelling the contract. So from an Act point of view, the Act currently is silent on those issues. So to answer your question, it depends which side you see. I see this as an opportunity for me, because just from a mere compliance point of view, in fact, the more people don't comply, the better. And I always say, if you're smart, get in early and make sure that you find your position and you capitalize. That's what I see companies doing.
The one implication then is that the competitive advantage, because no one else is doing it, so you will get it.
Yes.
But I think we're also talking about the actual consequence for me as a business.
Yes.
I've got to now spend time that I could be spending on market research or marketing or developing product or improving my customer service, doing actual finding the so I'm going to spend some of that time, energy and money now on a new administrative admin aspect.
Yes.
And I suppose that's maybe a question you can't answer. Will that I suppose if you first to do that, you're saying the competitive advantage will hopefully be worth that amount of effort.
Business people know this, and it's not unique to South Africa. I do business all over the world. If I go to Brazil and I'm there and there's a company from India and I get told, as an example, these are the requirements, the first one that quickly complies and deals with them has a competitive advantage. It doesn't matter what.
That's the
tomorrow you can
reason.
remove BE and put environmental issues. I'll be the first one to comply. People are currently complying on health and safety, environmental, ISO. No one is complaining because they know that it's part of either as barriers to entry at some level, and whereas with BE, like for me, the most amazing thing is, and I'm not suggesting that, but it's not like we're running short of black people per se, as an example, and BE does not suggest that giveaway. I've always said, and Keith and I wants to exchange, but if I was white, I would make more money now than being black, because all you have to do as a white person, you have to own 70% of your company, as an example. I'll probably have about 5 or 6 companies where I could find good entrepreneurs that are passionate, assist them with market access, and I'll be making money while my competitors are still thinking, should I do this? Should I not do this? So because we want to just be part of debating, because to me that's yes.
E
Do
BBEE or don't be do BBEE.
Yes.
To be
To be or not to be.
So we
To
so
be,
if it is, we're green. It's to be.
Yes.
What we want to talk about now is because there's laws that have been changing right now.
Yes.
Within the next 2 months, the president's going to sign them. They're going to come into within a year. People have to now change their BE strategy to comply with the new changes, and if they don't, so those people that are fronting, they could be held liable.
I'm saying to protect white guys like me, so to speak, who wants to do it right, who wants to get on with the market research, the competitive advantage, and who embraces the fact that once it's done, you go anywhere in the world, you implement the same model. I mean, one of the impressive companies, Johnson Controls, they're using the B scorecard as their model for sustainability all over the world.
Yeah.
They just go in and say, we are here, we're going to support the local community, we're going to employ the community, we're going to, train them, So by just using that model, they are being seen as a social responsible company.
So just to emphasize a point, Keith, that you made earlier, if we take these codes and we start asking the question to BEE or not to BEE, actually if you're doing it and you're doing it well already, well then you just carry on as is.
Yeah.
There's no changes.
Then.
Yes.
There's
No,
no
absolutely.
implications.
And I
if
think
someone is doing
that's what
it.
Keith was
No,
saying earlier.
they're not going to be major changes. Certainly the Act isn't going to have any major effect on what a person is going to do. We are suggesting that people get to have a brief understanding of the revised codes, and those, of course, we discussed last time, and they're not going to be implemented in the exact way that they came out, and they still a long time coming before they're even going to be implemented. But we know that BEE is here. We know what B is intended to do. It's intended for skills development. And yes, I recognize that some companies are going to spend a lot of money on skill development, but aren't we all saying that one of the bigger problems in this country is lack of skills? So if it's not companies are going to provide those skills, then is it going to be government? If government's going to provide the skills, well, then they're going to increase your taxes. Now, nobody wants to pay toll roads, so nobody really wants to pay for additional taxes on skills development. So what government is really asking is, won't you as a company do a little bit of skill development if you say that you can't get the right skills? So spend a little bit of money. Yes, there are, unfortunately, they're going to be costs, but those costs can be managed and accurately forecast. So, in the future, when the new codes, and I do want to emphasize the difference between the codes and the Act, when the new codes come out and need to be implemented, my estimate is 2015 that we'll need to start it. Be aware that of what the minister is looking at, of what the president is talking about. Listen to the problems that we have in the country, and you'll see that we're going to need to sort out the skills development problem. We're also going to need to sort out things like the supply development, which tends to make people feel good about it. And Ndili used these examples of companies all over the world who have to worry about health and safety, and yes, it's all red tape. We would love there to be absolutely no red tape. I'd love to drive in the center of the highway rather than on the left or right, but I've got to follow the rules to some extent. So BEE is one of the more benign regulations. You don't have to do very much to comply. There's a lot more difficulty of following other laws and rules, and ISO is a big deal for many companies. Health and safety. If you want to provide, if you're a company that provides food to any of the big supermarkets, they're going to send an inspector along, and he's going to be a lot more difficult than Andili's most difficult analyst.
Okay, so then maybe as a sort of pulling things together, then. The amendment bill in its own right should not affect the business in any direct way if your company is operating ethically and with integrity and with the intention of transformation. Certainly, the revised codes will be released at some point in one guise or another, and at this point we don't know what that is going to look like, and we also don't know we don't know what kind of time frames. Keith, you were saying 2015. What are your thoughts on Dila in terms of when the revised codes are actually going to be come into play?
I think for me it depends on how soon the bill goes to NCOP. Narrative has gone through National Assembly and the President signs it, because my sense, I think what DTI are trying to manage is not to have the codes gazetted first before the bill is finalized.
Okay.
So really, I think it would have to be a thumbs up. But I can tell you, from what I'm seeing coming from DTI, before the end of the year, we should have the codes so that at least they are implemented in 2014. So in 2014. In 2014, to give that year of alignment.
The codes will say that there's a 1-year transition.
Sure.
So if they come out at, say, December of 2013, and traditionally they've always issued the codes around about the 16th or 17th of December, when all the media has gone on holiday and everywhere else has gone on holiday. It will then be implemented maybe. But I have to say that I think it was 2 days ago, or whatever, the minister was on a radio, and he said that he's hoping to have the codes out soon after the act is published.
Sure.
And
the publishing would be after it's been signed by the President,
which would be about September, October of the year.
Which then would mean that you'd kind of be looking at any time around September, October 2014 to possibly early 2015 in terms of when companies would need to look at it.
Definitely.
And if we just go back to what you were saying, Keith, about some of the key trends, supply development obviously being a key component of transformation in the country. Certainly skills development, and not just spending money for the sake of it, but spending money smartly, strategically. And then, of course, looking at your employment equity and diversity management and leveraging from that diversity.
I mean, I think for me that we were even already talking about the elements that we are confined with now. I mean, I'm now calling that there needs to be an element called IP development, because I think we need to begin to push South Africa to create inventors, to create people that can innovate, to say to people, you must go and farm, you must go and generate a technology or a software, a product. I think for me, that's the only time we're going to have the impact, because I had this again analysis this morning where in the ICT sector, particularly the sector codes, focus on companies in the sector, not companies that are performing those sector initiatives. In other words, they're not focusing on technology businesses. No. They're focusing on businesses that are in the technology sector. For me, those are two different things. As a result, there is no impact. We haven't seen a Google coming out of a gazetting of the sector code, for example. And for me, those are the things that I would like, if we look back 10 years from now and say, as a result of BE, for example, we did not have that particular technology. We have a South African company that was supported through this empowerment of resources to produce IP. So I'm for the IP element. And I'll be starting to lobby that they must get rid of one of the elements and support people that want to spend time in rooms like this to think and come up with inventions.
I guess it could be maybe aligned with the socioeconomic development element, or possibly a combination of enterprise development and socioeconomic development.
Yeah, but the thing is, you never know. That IP could be used in a company for skills. It could be used for SED.
Okay.
You know, we just want South Africans to learn to solve their own problems and use those solutions to sell them all over the world. And I think it's doable. But right now, it's not encourageable because there are no resources to fund such things. Whether a child somewhere dreams of coming up with his or her own car, you know, there aren't enough resources to support such initiatives. And for me, those are the really things that excites me. And I would like BE to be channeled. And it could be some child in the rural area who's walking 10 Ks to school, and he says, you know what, if I could only get this, I will solve this problem, whether it's solar, whether it's energy, rather than focusing on enterprises.
And so you're saying the B has a role to play in assisting,
of course,
that person with the resources they
with
need.
the resources, because in a normal economy, no one is investing in that. That's not business responsibility to invest on research and development, and there's a difference again between skills development and research and development.
So that would be very exciting.
So maybe in summary, a lot of fear around what the amendment bill is all about, and it seems as though if you are operating in integrity and ethically, there is no consequence. But perhaps the emphasis is more on what we can use BEE positively for, and how we can help to contribute to the success of our economy.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if you'd like to get hold of Andile, what's the one way people can get hold of you?
I think it's beandyourbusiness.com, and I'd really like to urge, to make my life easy, you need to go through Keith first. Because
okay, so then
in an ideal world,
to get touch of
he does
Andile,
all the
you have
hard
to go
work,
to
and he
Keith.
makes my life easy.
So Keith, how can people get hold of you?
Thank you so much. www.econobee.co.za.
Great. Well, to find out more about our guests, you can see their profiles on our website, ltp.ltnet.tv. And you can share your views with us. Tell us what you think the bills are all about and what's going to happen, and whether you are BEE or to BEE or not to BEE. Tell us on Facebook page, or you can tweet us at LT Possibility. So until next week, from us in the studio, Chris Dykes and myself, and from all of us here at Let's Talk Possibility, have a great week. And go notice the possibilities.